Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the GCNC Worldview podcast. Thanks so much for continuing to join us. I was looking at the calendar again, realizing that we have now been doing this podcast for over 4 years, and it's been quite the ride looking at the changes around the world, the different markets that have popped up, and sort of reflecting on the history of the cannabis industry, both recent and in the past, and acknowledging the fact that there's so much work still to be done to bring cannabis to people in ways that they can use it in the way it's really intended, which is to help folks. So this is the second edition of this season. I think I can still say Happy New Year because it's only the second week headed into the third week of January. So I'm going to let myself get away with that until about February 1st. But today we have got a brand and a group of people on the podcast that really reflect the bridge between the current industry we have and some of the history that brought us to this place. So Thomas Cutler with Gentlemen Smugglers, a brand out of the United States with a great story behind it. I love brand stories. Prior to cannabis, I ran ad agencies, and frankly, I didn't like the drama much of ad agencies, but I loved the stories. So, Thomas, before the show, we were talking about the fact that you guys didn't really um, use titles. It was a pretty well-oiled machine, and everybody chips in to do their part at the Gentlemen Smugglers. So we'll just say one of the smugglers, Thomas Cutler, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris, and a happy New Year back to
Happy New
you.
Year.
And thrilled to be on. Always thrilled to be talking to you. And yeah, so gentlemen smugglers, you talk about history, and that is really what kind of drew me to this business, frankly, and this brand. So just a quick recap: the
Yep.
Gentlemen Smugglers uh, is a brand that is based in this unbelievably authentic story. And the story is connected to Operation Jackpot, which is the first presidential sting in the war on drugs. And the Gentlemen Smugglers were a group of bandits, shall we say, Southern boys and women from South Carolina down to Florida, who started small, who started basically selling, to sort of college kids. Got a boat. Pretty soon they had a fleet. Pretty soon they were running the East Coast, and they basically built an empire. And for 12 years, they were running the trade from Lebanon during the Civil War there to Jamaica, to Colombia, all along the coast. And then they were targeted specifically under Reagan and the South Carolina governor, Henry McMaster, um, as as kind of a number one. We got to get these guys. And the twist is that the kingpins, the guys who ran the show, went to school with Henry McMaster. So they were
Mhm.
college buddies, friends from a long time ago. And one became the prosecutor, who is now the governor. The others became kingpins. So
Yeah.
it's quite a tale. It's an incredibly rich tapestry, and it's very much based in history. I mean, we talk about the legend of the smugglers. You and I have talked about that. That's what drew
We
me
have.
in. But
Yep.
it's really amazing because not only is it this fantastic tale, but it represents 50 years of the cannabis industry, of what
Yeah.
happened, when they were starting under Carter, and it was very, I would hardly say it was loose, but then the administration changed, and all of a sudden it was quite the crackdown, and it changed everyone's lives. And then for a dozen years after, in the 80s, this is your brain on drugs. We kind of go from there.
Mhm.
So Barry Foy, who is my partner, who is my basically the resident kingpin at the Smugglers,
Yep.
he's the one that lived it. This is his story. This is his crew's story. By the way, the crew has the greatest names ever. I mean, again, you talk about what sort of draws people in. So we've got Miami Tammy, Willie the Hog, Captain Judy,
Yeah.
Skip Sanders, Tink, the Preacher Man. I mean, these are all these names that a bestseller was written about them legitimately, and
Yeah.
we're working on a film project because there's so many layers. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's it's an authentic story, and a story I think is what brands need, and it helps because without that anchor, it's pretty tricky to get people involved.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate the story on multiple levels. One, as a marketing and brand geek, I love the way you guys have taken this story and crafted it in a way that can be both acknowledging the history, but also enticing to people today and relevant to people today, while also, frankly, respecting the history as well. Like, it in no place in any of our conversations over the last couple of years since we met have I felt like, we're there's a disrespect here for the history of it, or in a lot of ways it is acknowledging the challenges and the danger and the risk, and um, while also acknowledging that the plant has always and will always have a home and in people's lives. And we can champion legalization efforts and try and move that forward in these sort of storytelling manners. It was the entire theme of our C-suite connector in Vegas this year was
Right.
cannabis stories, right? And the year before, we got a chance to highlight some of the work you guys have done. So when we post this podcast, I'll make sure to put in the link to some of that past work as well, so people can really get the breadth of what we're talking about when we talk about the Gentlemen Smugglers and how you guys have pulled this together. So, you know, I haven't gotten an update from you in probably 6 months on how the brand expansion is going and where the products are available and that kind of thing. So why don't we talk about that a little bit as well?
Sure. Yeah. Of course. So, as you know, we started 2 years ago, and we launched in Massachusetts. We are an asset light company by design. And so, there's obviously lots of machinations within this industry and lots of ways to skin a cat. We looked at our core business model and said we want to be basically licensed company from a
Mm-hmm.
brand perspective because our forte is marketing and storytelling, and we've got this amazing wealth of material that we can bring to the table. We also recognize that we're not experts in everything. And so we want to be partnered with and have strategic partners who can help augment what we do best. And so we started in Massachusetts a couple of years ago, and we have since moved to our second market was New Mexico. Our third is Maryland. Our fourth is coming online in 2 weeks in New York. And so that is sort of part A of the business. You use the word challenge, when you were just speaking before, and it's funny because Barry, who clearly has the most experience and depth in this field of all of us smugglers, since he's been in the game so long. I mean, he will often say it is harder today to navigate this industry than it ever was before, and the caveat with that for your listeners and viewers is that he had 5 federal agencies after him at one time as a most wanted man in
Right.
America. So if he says it's harder now, and he's running from every law enforcement department pretty much in America and
Yeah.
abroad, then that's saying something. And, I kid, but sort of not, because
Yeah.
it is really challenging, as you well know, and you're at the forefront of this industry, because you touch so many different players and people, and you have this wealth of knowledge, Chris. But that's been something that for me, I think for all of us, but it's been a learning curve.
Yeah.
So it's taken a couple of years to get to the point where we really have a brand that we feel so confident in, that we can go to our partners and say this is going to work. Now there are lots of things that need to happen to make it work, But
Yep.
but we're really bullish on that front, regardless of the current climate, the economic climate that we all know is
Yep.
challenging, political climate. Who knows what's going to happen this year? And
Monday's a big day.
Monday's a big day.
So yeah.
And who knows what'll happen next week? And I just saw that Biden, pardoned 2,500 now in one of his last moves. So um,
Yep.
one of the things that's important to us and really important to Barry is partnerships, not just on the economic license front, but also partnerships that really do mean something to us. That actually you can make a change. And Last Prisoner Project is a terrific organization that means a lot to us, and certainly to Barry, because Barry served 11 years. All of the smugglers served time. All of them, yes, had this amazing run, but it came crashing down, and they paid the price. So I think that is something we'll have to just watch and see what happens in the next administration. But one thing, Chris, that we did that I think I touched on before when you and I saw each other a couple months ago, we looked at the business and we said, all right, we have one line here, that is this license line, and we want to make sure that partnerships are the operative word. We work with folks that we like, that we respect, that we trust, and we say, here's what we bring to the table. You know, a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago or so, we were approached about a Delta product, and we were reticent to jump in. And Barry was very concerned because he thought, this isn't my story. This isn't as authentic. Or what is the definition of authenticity? And, he's a flower guy. Back in the day,
Hmm.
he brought in tons. And so
Right.
we kind of had this conversation and decided not to do anything about it. And watching what's going on in this industry and watching the amount of other people saying, having the same conversations on,
Hmm.
from an economic standpoint and a brand standpoint, we may need to do more. And
Hmm.
so a couple of months ago, we decided we're going to do this. We kind of circled back, new partners, and we launched our SIPS product. And it took
Hmm.
about 6 months of R&D. We're just launching our site right now, our D2C. It's something we can control, which
Yep.
is a whole other a whole other conversation. But it's really exciting, and of course there are ups and downs. And we
Yep.
can dig in on. I'd love to get your thoughts on that market, the hemp market. But we're excited about that for different reasons. But at the
Yep.
end of the day, what was really fun about it was literally the storytelling, branding that we could do on our packaging. All the work building the site is one thing.
Yep.
Um, Getting product to market is another. Finding distributors, whether it's sort of the equivalent of SSOs in different markets. We're not with Anheuser-Busch, we're not with some national chain or anything like that. But finding markets where this is popular and we can come to it. And we spent so much time on the packaging because we were telling a story. How do we tell a story in just the packaging? How do we make people
Right.
say, "What's that?" Literally just ask the question. What does this mean? What are these icons? That kind of thing. And so,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
think I want to jump in
sure.
the a couple of interesting pieces here because I'm digging into the mental vault, right? Going through brand architecture and how we align that with marketing funnels and building all of this. And I think um, this is really certainly within the North American market right now. And I would say it won't be too long before this also starts to really rise even more in Europe and the UK and Australia. And it's a predictable trend that the notion of how do we capture the customer, the patients, even in medical only, how do we remind them that our product is differentiated, is distinct, is something worth being loyal to and giving your money to, um, is something that early on, when I came into the industry, I kept thinking, "Oh, this is big," and nobody cared. For the first 5 years I was here,
Mm,
nobody cared because it was all just about getting your product into a dispensary or through a distribution channel, and they didn't really care because it would sell.
yeah.
And now, as various markets have matured and the discussion has grown, now it is, I would say it has mattered for a while, but people have now begun to realize it actually matters. And they're staying authentic and true is important. And if you can do that, then you can start to diversify your product line and create these partnerships. And I mean, our organization, the GCNC, is fundamentally built on the idea that you will do better if you partner. And that is something
Yep, for sure.
else that has been fairly, I won't say unique, but lost in the early stages of the legal cannabis industry. You had a lot of organizations and people that really tried to convince the world that they were the only true path to success, and their company was going to, be the next McDonald's or whatever of
Right.
cannabis. And what a horrific thing. Like, to me, that's awful. Like, just, you want to create relationship with your audience. And I agree, that's what you're doing. I did a episode this week with someone in Germany who was working with the new cannabis clubs, which aren't really clubs at this point. They're kind of dispensaries and lots of
Okay.
rules, and that's going to continue to evolve. Um, but we were talking about not only the importance of compliance and taking care of the customers and pricing and that kind of thing, but also the fact that these clubs, by not going to straight to adult use and keeping this notion of clubs, it's rebuilding a more constructive cannabis culture in in the country of Germany than was there before, where it was very much illicit market driven, and a lot of people, the stigma had just grown so big that it was hard to overcome. And this notion of creating culture around the plant again was an increasingly important step to the future success of the market. And I think we see that here as well. I mean, in the United States, we're chaotic with our brands, and it always takes a while to see who sort of rises to the top. But you guys have done so much work on making sure that that is at the core, that I think it's great. Even if you miss a few dollars on what might be a slightly diversified product line, if it wasn't authentic, to just say, you know what, maybe we'll do that later, but not instantly. I think that's super
Yeah.
wise.
No, and I think we are also, we talk about this a lot internally because we talk about how we need to be true to our brand, and you talk about SKUs. We talk about how a lot of our current partners, the markets there are, flower is king, and of course Barry's story really leans into flower. But you also have to be aware of what's going on in the market with new products, whether it's vapes, concentrates, you name it, and diversifying your portfolio. You also have
Yep.
to be aware of the education slash lack of education that is going on now in terms of, we all know that we have partners who literally say, if we can't get 20 north of 25%, then we won't even get in a door. Like, it's that
Mm-hmm.
much of a cutoff, which is somewhat anathema to our story, and yet we have to lean in as a business. But we also
Mm-hmm.
kind of look at other trends of what's going on, which kind of this led us to the hemp side of
Yep.
less alcohol, healthier living, being more focused, being more functional, etc. So our drink enhancers are really meant to give you a nice buzz. You feel great. It's not couch potato. We're not trying to be
Yep.
that. We are also
Yep.
looking at a market that is evolving. And we want to
Yep.
make sure, a year and a half ago, we said we are not going to do this. We had good reason. But we kind of look back too and say, well, those people were pretty prescient in that sense. And
Mm-hmm.
they were looking ahead and saying,
Yep.
here is what is happening. And it's going to be difficult. We all know that. It's going to
Yep.
be rocky. When we were out at MJ and saw you, uh, Texas, right then and there, we're talking about this hemp thing. We're going to shut it all down. I talked to a
Yep.
friend who was then went to BevNet right after MJ in San Diego, and I said, "Did you hear that? Is that actually going to happen?" We're talking to people in Texas. They said everyone just said, "Nope, it's not going to happen," or it will
Right.
happen, and it'll be smart regulation. And that's what we're hoping is that
Yeah, I'm not sure Texas is capable of smart regulation, but I think in
right.
general, you're right. I that was a significant amount of saber rattling, I think, on their part. Headed into an election or right
Very
out
much.
of an election and all that. At the same time, I think I mentioned this to you previously, but for the audience, I did a market tour last year when I was coming back from our European stint, and I flew into Pennsylvania, and then I drove south, and I went all through the South,
Oh,
across to Texas, and because I hadn't really been boots on the ground in those states in
okay.
a very long time, and got a feel for what was going on and all that kind of thing. And I think the best hope absolutely would be smart regulation around all of these products, and do the testing, make sure we know what's in there. Because I stood on a street in Nashville, watched a hemp boutique pop-up dispensary tell tourists a whole lot of incorrect information on the product that they were about to
Oh,
consume,
wow.
and that's awful. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that needs to be fixed, right? And it's the same problem in markets like Texas, where this sort of grandstanding about protecting people is actually hurting them. You're doing a disservice to your state and community by um, not regulating medicinal and recreational cannabis, and by ignoring the fact that the hemp products as well should have sound regulation and testing and all of that, and then let the market decide the types of products that they would prefer. To me, that seems pretty easy to figure
Yeah.
out, but politics always gets in the way, and we've seen similar trends in Peru. We did our summit in Lima this last year, and I spoke to Congress, members of Congress
Yeah, I
in
remember, yeah.
Peru, about the whole notion of don't repeat that here. Let's get ahead of the regulation. Let people run their businesses. Let people create products. Be innovative. Address the market, but um, make sure you put guardrails around it so you don't end up in chaos. And so, in that sense, I guess it's a good thing, because we can look at it and say, hopefully, other countries and other markets around the world are learning from some of those mistakes. And hopefully, I'm wrong about Texas, and hopefully, they can
Right.
figure it out. I would really like to be wrong um,
No, but
about it.
this kind of leads to a question I have for you, which is, you talk a lot about brands. We are an American brand. Yeah, sure, these guys ran the East Coast, but we see it as an American story, very much so. We also see it as an international story because, Barry and his crew were abroad all the time doing these massive deals. I mean, it's sure there's a romance to it, but it's also in the middle of a hurricane, in the middle of a civil war, etc. We thought this is going to be a great opportunity on the international side to we think the story is going to really resonate. One thing, Chris, that we've kind of learned and been a little frustrated on is it's just a lot slower abroad, and we have not been able to kind of make any headway. We've talked to a lot of people, but what do you think is sort of the future for brands, not sort of the international future, but the future for brands in various markets? Is it incredibly country? Is it country by country, or is there a bigger trend? I don't know. So I'm really curious
Yeah.
to get your.
Well, first of all, thanks for queuing me up. Now that you're hosting, I appreciate that. The
Great. Yeah. Thanks for
the
coming today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. No, quickly, I will say this topic is actually sort of at the forefront of what we're trying to bring to New York at the beginning of June through the Cannabis Means Business Conference. We're looking at the future of retail, at the future of brands. We're gonna Certainly, you're on our invite list for that, but so are companies out of the UK and out of South America. Um, Observation is, it's not necessarily that they're slower. There's more pragmatism in a lot of ways, and there is a fear, for sure, of irresponsible branding, which I think transcends cannabis and extends across all consumer sectors because really with the rise of AI and digital technologies, it is really easy to pull the wool over consumers' eyes, right? And so with a lot of uncertainty around cannabis and a lack of knowledge among regulators, you end up with just absolutely insane rules around branding and communication in this industry. So that is something that we all have to continue to challenge and battle. Um, One thing I have pointed out the world to regulators is in states that have mature and well-regulated adult use markets, teen use goes down. And
Mm,
so if you look at the whole notion of protecting children
right.
and managing things in a way that is safe for people, really creating good regulations that are strong and allow responsible companies to communicate who they are and what they stand for, you a service for your communities
Sure.
and municipalities and countries. So that is my consistent answer to people when they're like, well, we got to restrict advertising and we can't let communications out. It's like, you're actually hurting yourself. So we're still at that stage in a lot of markets where we're having that discussion to push it through. But there are other markets where we have seen progress. And I think for companies in the United States who are always looking to make a buck tomorrow, and not really worried about making a buck 5 years from now, that's our problem to fix. We need to go in and look at brands that can help educate people in a responsible way and become community partners in building these stories and understand that, yeah, we got to sell product, but we also have to rebuild an industry that has been decimated by incredibly bad propaganda and misinformation.
Sure.
And so for me, the brands need to take this on and build in that way and find those markets where they can do things and then use those stories to expand to the others. In almost every case, the trend lines are positive for responsible brands
Mm,
over the
yeah.
long haul, right? But that's a story that investors in the United States don't always like to hear because they
Right.
want to see an ROI in 12 to 18 months and do an
Of course.
exit and get out and take all the glory. And you know what? That's not the business of cannabis today.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
We've learned
so
that. So yeah.
yeah, and everybody has, and the ones that are in it really for reasons, I think, find ways to pivot and be successful,
Yeah.
and go from there. So we'll have much more to talk about
Great.
over the
Great.
coming
No, I'm
months in
excited for
that
that
area.
conference. Great.
So, but and yeah, thanks for letting me pontificate on my theories a little
Oh, I
bit.
think it's fascinating.
That's
So thank
good.
you.
Talk to me a little bit about this video project. Where's that at? Because I know you guys have been working on that in the background for a while. And
Yeah,
how's
so I
that
mean, this
coming?
this is this is the Smugglers project, as you can see from the trailer. It's born for the screen. So there is a different team that's kind of managing all that, and there's a lot of exciting things in sort of coming up in terms of where that's going to land and what we're doing. But the idea, just for the audience, is it's a sort of limited doc series because it's I go back to the word tapestry. It is not only a great overview of the war on drugs and using this one story to exemplify the whole, um, but it's a hell of a story. So it's
Yeah.
got all the twists and turns you could imagine, and it's very much a roller coaster. And honestly, more than anything, it's got these characters that are born for the screen, but are just the most riveting people on both sides. I will say that not just the smuggler side, but the law
Mhm.
enforcement side too. It's very much a um, catch me if you can. And
Yeah.
so again, totally separate team that's kind of working on that. But there will be an announcement in the next couple months about
Great.
where that will land, and so we're really excited. There's already a lot of pre-production that's going on, and so there's
Amazing.
great news to come on that.
Well, I know that when those announcements come, I'm sure we'll see them and we'll be able to push
You'll be
those out
first.
and tell
You'll be
everybody.
first.
So I love that, and it's been great. To hear what's going on and to get a little bit more insight. For those listening in, just Google the Gentlemen Smugglers. You'll find them. I'm happy to hear you're in New Mexico, which is where I grew up.
That's
That's
right,
very cool. And now in New York, so we can work together on the Cannabis Means Business Conference in June.
for sure.
Um, and we'll definitely look for updates in the coming months as those things come to the fore with the video project and everything else. So appreciate you joining us today, Thomas. Thanks so much for coming on. And to everybody out there in podcast land, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit all the right buttons and subscribe. I'm Chris Day, your host with the Global Cannabis Network Collective, with Thomas Cutler from the Gentlemen Smugglers. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.